But we had a couple questions, actually pretty similar themes, one from Tom J. and one from John Morkey that talked about. Tom said that the presentations emphasized the challenge of getting relying parties involved, and separately, John's asked, with the pilots, how do you get over some of the relying party hesitancy? He also asked, what's working, what's broken, how are policy choices impacting things? Can all five of the presenters unmute and sort of jump in and talk about some of these things? I'd actually love to get some more specific feedback on some of the relying party issues that we're dealing with, since it really is so key to the ecosystem.
So this is Dave Cox. I can give you, our experience has been, you have to have a champion within a relying party who is a mover and shaker and has top cover from the executive team. And basically, we get very specific very quickly about the use case, and then we've learned to bring in the legal staff as well as the privacy folks and the business folks, because if you wait on the legal contracts piece, you're gonna go into a death spiral eventually, because they're gonna come right back around. And the security people, obviously, who need to get up to speed are key stakeholders as well. So we just go right for the core of those different stakeholders and bring them into the process.
Thanks. Other perspectives?
This is Aaron. I just wanted to quickly ask Dave, in the pilots that you are doing, are you working just in healthcare, or are you working in multiple domains? Because I'm curious if there's a difference between the barriers for highly regulated industries like healthcare versus, say, some other industries that are less regulated but looking for higher assurances.
Well, most of the industries we're working in are highly regulated financial services or government spaces. I think what we're finding is that the highly regulated industries are actually more apt to adopt a federation model if the use case is appropriate.
That makes sense. Do you think that there's things that are common to everyone? That relying parties are all objecting to, well, I got this, it works, why should I change? That's like common to everything.
I think it's just education and marketing, quite frankly. We're early in the process of federation. That's been our experience.
One thing, this is Kathy with Dayon. One of the things that we're struggling with is that what I mentioned earlier, that the big RPs are big enough to do it all themselves, and so if they have a use case for federation, that certainly helps. But for example, we offer an on-premises solution as well, and so many of the big players would prefer to bring that solution in-house rather than depend on an external provider. And so trying to get them to understand the advantages of an off-premises solution can be challenging. But we're trying to, build up a repertoire of, information to help them with that.
Yeah, and Kathy, this is Mike. I'd actually echo that. One of the successes we've had in the health IT space has been being able to help them walk through their business processes where federated identities can help, and then actually crosswalk to their regulatory pieces. So, for example, taking HIPAA for the healthcare IT folks and then identifying those core areas that are important in the identity space, and then actually providing them a visual representation has been very powerful in, kind of promoting adoption.
I would echo that, Mike. We've had to do a proof of concept demo, if you will, for each relying party, and their constituency, internal stakeholders, just to get them all on the same page.
Yeah, that seems to be the theme, is that we have to find a use case that gets them interested, and then they start thinking of the other 400 reasons that they should have it.
Exactly.
And we're pretty successful with the adoption. But if we try to talk to them about the 399 things that they currently don't care about, we get shut down pretty quickly.
So let me ask a question. Given some of these common challenges, and all of this is, as all of these lessons are feeding back into the steering group, what can the steering group do in terms of putting together, frameworks or, perhaps, I would say what frameworks, but, what about toolkits in terms of how to actually bring RPs on in a more easy fashion that could be used to make this model more replicable? What do folks think of that?
But there's definitely a demand, at least for the work that I'm doing with the states and HIE programs and PHRs, is to understand this crosswalk with existing regulations. One of the things that I learned from watching today, Jeremy, was with regards to, I think it was called upshifting of LOA. A lot of our service providers have a baseline LOA, and then they have folks that they want to serve who may be willing to pay to upgrade, so to speak, or upgrade on a particular task, but not pay for a premium for those where LOA 2 is sufficient. So that, I think, is really, innovative. I haven't been exposed to that before, and learning more about that from the group and how we might be able to share that across not relying parties, but their service providers, and educating relying parties that, you don't have to buy at LOA 4 in order to eventually sell at LOA 4. You can buy at LOA 2, get into the market, and there's an upgrade path or a roadmap to being able to support higher levels of assurance down the road.
This is Ken, and one of the other relying party leverage points may be around the multi-factor authentication story. So given that many relying parties are considering MFA now for the vast number of phishing attacks that are happening, if a relying party says that they want to offer you MFA, say, wonderful, don't send me a token, use my existing token, and I think that in turn builds a sense that federation can be a good return on investment by not having the relying parties have to mail out and manage second factor tokens.
So one of the questions that come, is the BYOD OSs that are coming out on handhelds going to support that kind of MFA thinking?
I believe so. From what I see, certainly the FIDO stuff and some of the other work around normalizing MFA approaches makes it even easier for us to do the integration at the IDP end, supporting a wide variety of second factors. So many of our institutions are offering a variety of second factor choices to their users, and we can support all that and just still have only a single factor or a single token going out to people.
Most of our docs and social workers have a phone with them. They would love to use that as their token.
Right. Aaron, that's exactly what our pilot is doing, is using the mobile device as an authentication platform for multiple authentication factors and methods, so that depending on the risk of the transaction, the RP decides, what factors to invoke, but it's all based off of the mobile device, something that somebody already has. They're familiar with it. They don't have to buy or mail, another token. And support for all the life cycle associated with that mobile device too. So if you lose it, if you get a new one, if you have more than one, all those things to be taken into consideration.
So given what we know now, do people think that the IDSG and their steering committee should be focusing on a really tough domain like healthcare, or maybe some subsets of the problems, or what are people's thought processes after this period of piloting? Let healthcare take care of itself, or should we tackle that and try and take it down, and then that everything else would be solved using the same tools?
Well, this is Mike, and maybe I can offer a little bit of my 2 cents. We spend a good amount of time crossing these domains in the relying party recruitment side, and there are several common themes that come from them, and I think in kind of listening to the conversations, I think we've touched on a good amount of them. Is one of the first things is that the relying parties definitely need to understand the business value that they're getting from federated identities. They understand the cost of multi-factor authentication. What they don't necessarily fully understand is how a federated ecosystem that adds all these additional things like additional information that may be of value, additional privacy controls, additional customer convenience, additional tokens, how they can all be combined together in a fashion that they can use, because there's differing standards in the regulated industry. Dave kind of alluded to sometimes it's easier in the conversations in the regulated industries because they have a plethora of controls that they have to actually adhere to, whereas the other industries that aren't so heavily regulated may not have quite as many. And so if we can come up with almost a cross-cutting type of business value toolkit, proposition, thing like that can go across these verticals, then you can start to dive deeper into each one and make it specific. And then hopefully, that's just one of the ways that, we kind of use it as a toolkit. We have a common set of business value, and then we just kind of dissect it for each of the industries.
Jeremy, at the end of the day, your question kind of asked, how can we drive broad scale adoption? Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that broad scale adoption is, the pilots, as they generate successes, those get advertised, they generate momentum, hopefully there's large scale, the usability's there, the incentives are all there, but then there has to be a marketing push. And the marketing push, the IDSG is a community of companies and individuals. And I think it's serving its purpose, but as we get more successes out there, you build more energy and momentum by marketing. And right now the marketing is successful through the community, but how do you reach out to really begin to change the mindset of the security people in major organizations and the lawyers and folks like that? I think it's just, maybe it's just an adoption cycle that we're going through. And once you get some momentum, how do you keep driving it hard?
Yeah, well, and I think part of the philosophy of the pilots is that the stuff is hard, so let's fund, some projects that can tackle it at a smaller level, and then, once you, figure out some successful paths forward, that's something that can be replicable. The idea is, success should be infectious, and if people, start having great success, leveraging strong federated credentials in, one segment of their lives, there's a reason for them to start expecting the use of it other places. And, this is why we continue to be committed to pilots and keep fighting for them in the budget process every year. We think that they're going to be essential to have these for the next, support the ones we have and another couple of years on the top of that to really, provide the seeds for the marketplace. So, I agree. Beyond that, there's help needed in marketing. There's issues. I think Jim Fenton raised a question a little bit earlier that, he wanted to get take on. Are some of the reliant parties dissuaded about some of the privacy protecting natures of what's in NSTIC and what they call for in the identity ecosystem? And that's the ability that they might lose some ability to, they're concerned they might lose ability to do some things they currently do, scare them off. But I think, identifying what those barriers are, that we're seeing with RPs and the notion of a compelling business model is something that, I'd love to document further, because I think it, directs us, in terms of where we should be going next.
Well, in terms of IDESG working groups, if there's a community of healthcare, in the financial services sector or whatever, I'm sure every one of the pilot participants would be happy, one-on-one or with a group, to talk about use cases and how we could support some of their use case requirements. Those are, I assume, are going to be relying parties having that conversation to try to resolve.
What I was going to say, Jeremy, kind of the inverse is true in healthcare. Is what we're finding is, the more we are able to do with policy enabling and identity assurance activities, the more ROI we can get to. So today, for the last 5 years, since the beginning of time, we've ignored mental health. It's too sticky. People are too sensitive about it, and we end up leaving a lot of money and a lot of lower quality lives behind as a result. So if we can get to the point where we're bringing in those sensitive data, where we're able to do some better continuity of care, there's a lot of ROI that we wouldn't be able to realize in any other way than some of the stuff that you're helping us lead.
Hey, Jeremy, there's a couple comments. RPs don't see the business value in this effort. I'm not sure who Tom J is, but quite frankly, every one of the RPs we're working with absolutely get the business value and are able to lower their costs through working through our exchange, through their direct costs, as well as open up new applications in their ecosystem. So if there's a question about that specifically, I could take it offline, but there's a whole list of value propositions for RP to get engaged.
Yeah, I think the issue is more, and you know, pilot folks, correct me if I'm wrong, the RPC, the value proposition, but there are fiefdoms within the company that have to sign off on it that sometimes need some convincing, and that can take time.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like, I work a lot with the lawyers, right? So attorneys, like, want to practice the same thing they learned 45 years ago when they got on the bar. And a lot of this stuff we've never heard of before. MFA, you say MFA to the next 40 lawyers you meet, they will have no idea what you're talking about, right? So they are really at the very beginning of the learning curve on this stuff. Looking to folks like us to sort of educate them on, and I think that's why it's a lot of cookie cutter kind of compliance that you see with, you know, a lot of privacy policy requirements, it's security rule from HIPAA and so forth. Is no one understands what the equivalent would be or why we would claim that they are equivalent. And we can't wait another 15 years for NIST to say, well, this is equivalent to LOA 3. You know, we need to start doing that ourselves and helping you guys adopt it ourselves. So, you know, one of the things that my organization happy to do, working with PHR pilots. Anybody who's doing that, I saw a couple. Be happy to hear from you what the value is for your offerings to the RPs, you know, for PHRs, HIEs, HR vendors.
Thanks. Well, I know we are coming up. It is now 5 o'clock, which is when this thing is supposed to wrap. If there's any other final questions or closing remarks, love to have them now. If not, I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation along with the next round of 5 NSTIC pilots, January 14th, 15th, and 16th down in Atlanta. It's not too far away. In fact, it's less than a month away. So we'll look forward to more of this then. But any final questions or closing remarks? All right. Well, I really appreciate, first off, wanted to thank Laura and Kay and Sudi and the folks at the IDSG Secretariat at Trusted Federal who put this webinar together. Thanks to our pilot participants for taking the time to share their experiences. And thanks, of course, to all of you for taking 3 hours out of your day to learn a little bit more about the pilots and contemplate what they can do and what you all can do to advance the identity ecosystem. So always look forward to hearing from folks in the community here at the MPO, and we'll look forward to seeing many of you after the holidays down in Atlanta. So in the meantime, happy holidays, everybody.